Hey there, it's Schenk here with a quick presentation called The Truth About Client Attraction. So this basically came about with me starting out and, trying to figure out how to attract clients for our business. And everything I found out there was basically very appealing in the sense of I didn't want to be a sleazy salesman. That was my background. Not my background was being a sleazy salesman. It's basically me suffering with the sleazy salesman dilemma. Basically, everywhere I looked, people told me, well, you need to do objection handling and trial closes and, all that good stuff. So anything I could do to avoid that client or that sleazy salesman thing was, of course, very, very appealing to me. Now, I don't know about you, but really deep down, it's a fear of rejection. Both me doing this for a long time, as well as then working with countless sales reps for newspapers, advertising sales reps for newspapers. It's basically fear of rejection at the end of the day. That's why we're drawn to client attraction stuff, where they magically come to us. And unfortunately, of course, in the practice, clients refuse to come flying to us. Now, there's a reason for this. Basically, a lot of the stuff that's being sold out there as client attraction is nothing but direct response marketing. You put out an ad, and then people respond to it, or they don't. And the assumption is, of course, that if you put out an ad that says, hey, look, we've got very cool stuff on client attraction, then only those who are highly qualified respond. Now, of course, the truth is that all kinds of people respond, and then before you know it, you're not quite sure whom you're speaking to, and you end up using normal sales psychology. The other thing is that these courses are typically sold to you using hardcore selling. There are bonuses, there is scarcity, there is all that good sales psychology thing. They use NLP tricks. Hey, just imagine if you have my course, then people will be flocking to you, etc., etc., etc. And in a way, it's a bit of a joke that people tell you they can teach you how to do client attraction, and then they sell their course using hardcore selling. I mean, come on. If you knew what you're doing, you might as well attract me as a client, and then there's no question if I want your course. If it's right for me, I'll buy it from you, because you demonstrate that it's of great value. There will be positive ROI for me, and therefore I'm more than happy to give you money for this course. No need for bonuses. Alrighty. So the question is there a better way? And I would argue, yes, there is. And this is not only my personal experience selling various products and services online for the last decade or so, but also I joined my parents' company. They took over a company 25 years ago selling basically workshops. It's workshops and consulting to national newspapers in Germany, training the sales reps. And through that experience, I joined them about 10 years ago. I can tell you there is a better way. So this is the better way. And basically, it's all based on the observation that people have different informational needs. And the beauty of this is scientific. It's not made up stuff. There's no woo-woo, fluffiness to it. This is real hardcore. You can prove this. You can, put out your advertising material and use what I'm telling you right now, and you will see a difference. So basically, there are a couple or three main factors. One is the timing in relationship. Next one is the timing in the buying decision cycle, and the next one is personality. So let's have a look at these three in turn. The timing in relationship, what I mean by this is basically how hot or cold is your relationship? How well does the prospect know you? The reality is that there's information overload. We have just too much information out there, so as a result, we suffer from information overload and then overwhelm. And there's absolutely no time left. What I see far too often is that someone goes out and says, hey, look, I'll put out this big webinar or something. Please join my webinar. And I have made that mistake myself. I used to, in the beginning, think, well, I want to impress upon my prospects that they should trust me and that I've got great content. So what I'm doing is I'm putting together a 50-minute video. And guess what? I mean, out of 100 people, maybe 2 or 3 watch the entire 50 minutes. But most people just turn off after 5 minutes or 3 minutes or 1 minute. The vast majority never even look at the thing. They just look at it and go, man, 50 minutes? I cannot invest that time because I don't know if what's coming is of value to me. And that is basically Most people who do marketing ignore that first question, which is, should I trust this person? Why should I trust this person? Why should I invest any of my valuable time in this person? So in terms of relationship, you need to start out with content that is short and to the point, and people can convince themselves very quickly that yes, this is for them, and boom. Do not start with, hey, come to my 90-minute webinar, because, well, they don't know you just yet. So why should they schedule the time in their busy calendar anyway, and then set aside 90 minutes? If they don't know that there's a good or a high chance of a great payoff, because let's face it, on the webinar landing page, you could promise anything. It's the typical bragging, begging, and bribing. So because you can provide any information you like, they have no way of knowing if it's true. And therefore, what you need to do in the beginning is give them an opportunity to convince themselves very, very quickly that it's probably a good investment of the time to attend that webinar. As David Meerman Scott puts it, don't put a barrier between you and your prospects, or your best content on your prospects. And that's basically what needs to happen in the relationship at the beginning, so people can come and figure out on their own terms whether that is a relationship worth pursuing or not. Like I said before, ultimately this is all about giving people an opportunity to convince themselves that what you've got is right for them. So that is timing in relationship. Over time, you can deliver more in-depth content, but in the beginning, and this is, I would almost say, bitter personal experience. It's, certainly been painful at times when I had the intention to put out great value, high value content, and people simply did not check it out. Why? Because I ignored this very point in front of me. Alrighty. The next one is timing in the buying decision cycle. And what I mean by this is, it's best illustrated with an example. A friend of mine who lives in a big city, I'm not going to give away the exact city, says, look, I've got these colleagues and they rank in Google. So when someone types in CRM, Microsoft, and then that city, they show up near the top. And that's the only way that they get clients. And when he described that situation, he said, look, when people come to Google and type in this thing, they've already done all the research, they've figured out all of this stuff, and so they are very highly qualified prospects. Now, that is true. The problem with this is that basically those people had to put in a ton of time doing their due diligence and research, etc., until they get to the point that actually what they want is a customer relationship management system, plus they want the Microsoft one, plus now they're looking for someone in the city. And that is basically a harsh reality. Most people, when they advertise their products and services online, focus on someone who's already done all their due diligence. Now you end up with all the competitors all competing for this particular keyword. They all want, anyone who's offering a CRM, Microsoft, now wants to have the same prospects, namely those who have already done their due diligence. And this opens up a massive opportunity, which unfortunately is ignored by most people. Namely, people out there are overwhelmed. Like I said before, there's information overload, and they lack clarity. When you are overwhelmed, you have your brain has no way of deciding what you should be focusing on. So you need to process everything, and that is what overwhelm is. If you can go out and give people clarity on where they're at and where they need to go to, and this does not have to be a selfish, the sort of fake educational content. This can and should be, in my opinion, genuine educational content where you educate people and they can then decide for themselves, oh, I like this person, I want to continue with them. For this particular thing, we have something, and I'm not going to go into great details on this, we have something called the 4-quadrant models, which is basically, it looks at the various stages, what people know, what they are aware of, consciously and subconsciously, what they already know and what they don't know. And when you apply that 4-quadrant model, you can basically take all your prospects and put them into one of the 4 quadrants and give them the right information at the right time. And then hence it's the timing in buying decision cycle. That way you're respecting where they're at. So to sum up this one thing as a one-sentence summary, if you like, if someone comes to you and they have absolutely no idea whether they need your thing, so let's say you are in the business of selling waterbeds to help with back pain, right? If they have absolutely no way of knowing if they even want a waterbed, maybe they just want to have surgery, or maybe they're not even aware why they're having back pain, then you will have to use all kinds of dodgy sales psychology tricks and scarcity and bonuses and price drops, etc. to sell them the waterbed. Why? Because they're confused. They don't know what it is they need. They have no idea. They have no way of deciding whether the waterbed really is the best choice for them. And as a result, anyone who then tries to sell them the waterbed resorts to using dodgy sales psychology. Now let's turn this around. Let's look at someone who's already decided they want a waterbed. And they have decided on the exact model, the specification, they've done all their social media research, they've figured out this is the one, and now maybe they're looking for the best price. Now, in that case, there's no point driving them through an endless educational sequence where you go, oh, well, you need to consider this, and this is why waterbeds are better than surgery. And they go, shut up, I've already decided I want the bed. Can you deliver this thing for, at these conditions, at this rate, whatever? Can you give me a discount, whatever? They already know exactly what it is they want. So it would be, once again, disrespectful to drive them through an endless funnel where they have to go and sit there and go, oh, come on, get to the frickin' point. So that's what I mean by timing and buying decision cycle. And that's what we do using the 4-quadrant model. Let's get to the last but not least. This is hugely important, and it's again best illustrated with a short story, The Fun of the Tunnel. The beginning of this year, my wife and I went to see friends in southern France, and behind our friend's house is a disused quarry. In that quarry, the quarry is big enough that they used to have train tracks in it to transport the rocks out of the quarry. Now, part of the quarry, lends itself to this kind of feature, is a tunnel, because the train had to go through a big giant rock. So this tunnel is about 400 meters or 400 yards long, and it bends. There's quite a big bend in it. So when you look in one end, you cannot see the other. There's no light at the end of the tunnel because it bends sufficiently. Now, this has been disused and dismantled for the last couple of decades. So people go for walks in the quarry or in the disused quarry. I'd been there down there quite a few times to see my friend Mark. And when Mark first showed me, look, the way you go through this tunnel is you take a stick, you hold it against the wall, you kind of rub it against the wall, and you hear the stick against the wall, and that way you navigate through the tunnel. Fine, cool. So I've done that a few times, and it's great fun because when you're going through this, you're in complete and utter darkness. There's absolutely no light whatsoever, but you can hear. So it's absolutely fine. You go through this. Now, this year, for the first time, I went down there with my wife, and she point blank refused to go into the tunnel. I'm going, well, come on, it's great fun. Let's go in there. And it was sheer panic for her. There's no way she was going to go in there. Now, when I thought about this and discussed this with a good friend of mine who is an expert at these things, he pointed out to me that basically the way my wife's brain is hardwired is that the fundamental question she always wants to have answered is this safe? If she cannot be sure upfront if this is safe, she's not interested. For me, on the other hand, it's all about freedom and exploration and the unknown. Let's see how we figure things out as we go along. So I'm more than happy to go into this tunnel, and if there's a big hole in the ground, well, I'll probably figure it out, and then somehow in complete darkness I'll climb out of it. Whereas for my wife, and this is not meant to be condescending at all, it is how brains are hardwired. Very, very important. I'll give you another example, maybe less extreme. The other day, our kids, it's winter, snow falls, and first snowfall. Excellent, the kids are all excited, they're going to go to school. And of course, what are they going to do? They're going to have a snowball fight. The first thing my wife says is, oh, by the way, make sure you wear a hat that covers your ears so no one throws a snowball against your ear and then you get snow in your ear and you get some ear infection or something like that. These are the things that are on my wife's brain or on my wife's mind. It is important to figure out all the things up front to make absolutely sure nothing untoward happens. Whereas for me, I only thought about the joy of throwing snowballs. So this is all encapsulated in a model we've called the 5E model. It's basically 5 different ways of looking at the world. One is the fundamental question at every single stage. People ask themselves, is this safe? So if you go out and present a course or some material or just content where at the back of their minds they're going, this is probably not safe. There are so many things that could go wrong. I'll give you an example, right? Let's say you're selling social media services. a person who thinks like my wife will be thinking, yeah, but what happens if some trolls come across my social media presence and start making negative comments? That's a real issue for them, and they need to have that absolutely nailed down, step by step, exactly what is going to happen up front. Otherwise, they're not going to engage with your course. There's no way. It's just too risky. Whereas someone who's hardwired like me goes, yeah, we'll figure it out as we go along. If people complain, we'll just respond politely. And for me, it's not a big issue. Alrighty, so this all then, everything I've just shown you, then kind of funnels into something we've termed rejection marketing. And I'll give you 3 very specific examples. So the underlying philosophy of rejection marketing is to use everything I've just shown you, the 4 quadrants, the energy, etc., the timing of where people have informational needs, and reject people as early as possible. Anyone who's not qualified to do business with you, we want to reject as early as possible. And I'll give you 3 examples of where this goes wrong, and it's being disrespectful of the needs people have. Taki Moore, I know, great guy. He does wonderful work in the coaching, personal development world. He does webinars. Most of his lead generation is through webinars, and you sit through this, and they're beautifully crafted. I mean, it's a sort of sales mecca, if you like. He uses all kinds of cool tricks, and you get to imagine all kinds of stuff. And every NLP trick in the book is in his webinar. So they are, if you're into that kind of stuff, well worth studying. And right at the end of you sitting through an hour and a half or 2 hours of this thing, and he's done his pitch for his course or live event, it says, oh, by the way, this is only for people who are making at least 20 grand a month. So anyone who's not making 20 grand a month just sat through an hour and a half or 2 hours of a live event, and they got all fired up. They got all excited. Man, this is awesome. Well, you might argue, well, it's not so bad. Okay, you invested an hour and a half, but at least you didn't buy anything. Well, FK, Frank Kern, right, does great work in selling stuff. I mean, he's a great salesman. And I've bought courses of him. I've invested, in quotes, 8 grand into a course with Frank Kern. And this is not bitching and moaning. I'm just pointing out various things where this goes wrong. Which was on, high-end consulting. And then in that course, he suddenly goes, all right, and now you drive traffic with Facebook. You get leads from Facebook. And I'm going, hang on, this is quite a few years ago. It's like, I have no idea how to get traffic from Facebook, how to get leads from Facebook. And it was just put in there. It's like, okay, well, we're not going to cover that because it's obvious. Well, Frank, you should have told me up front. I'm now looking at 8 grand down the drain because I have absolutely no idea how to do Facebook traffic, right? So there is an example of where this can completely go wrong because you didn't tell people up front. And of course, then you have disgruntled customers, which no one likes. I'll give you another example, and this is a live one. I happen to have, I've just found this yesterday. Perry Marshall, again, respect the guy. I've spent tons of money with him. All his high-end courses I've bought. And they're very, very good. But here's an example of where this goes wrong. So he's just got a new product out, and it's at simplified.fm. Go and read this thing. And it starts like this. Every year, planet Perry acorn blossoms into 100 million or sometimes a billion, lots of big numbers. So you get all excited, right? And I'd like you to pay attention to the top right of the screen. When I scroll down, as you can see, there's a lot of text. And this doesn't scroll so fast. So this whole sales letter is massive, absolutely massive. And there's tons of information where you go, oh, I get it. This could be totally for me. This is mine. Brilliant. This is oh yeah, I want it. And see, this thing is still scrolling, right? Scroll. Big numbers, small numbers. Yes, I get more and more excited. And it's scrolling. And finally, we get to near the very bottom of this thing, and it says stage 1, initial screening, written application, telephone consultation, $100. Okay, that's pretty cool. Stage 2. If you are eligible for the Simplify scorecard, this typically requires revenues of $500,000 plus and realistic possibility that your company could surpass 10 million. Right? Now that they could have put up at the very, very top in the sense of a pre-head along the lines, oh, by the way, if you are making about $500,000 and have a realistic possibility that your company could surpass 10 million, then read this letter. It'll be really useful to you. Now I've just Anyone who's not fitting these criteria, just spend, I don't know, 20 minutes reading this thing and getting all excited. It's like, yeah. I mean, this is, no, I'm not going to say anything, but it's very, very teasing. And then, by the way, oh no, you can't have it because you're not making that money. So it's being disrespectful of someone who basically has information overload already and very little time in their day, and now you've made them sit through this giant letter just for them to find out at the very end, oh, it's not for them. Alrighty, and now I had to run out and tell my kids to shut up, and hence I have no idea where we are. It brings us finally to the ACT model, which puts it all together into a framework. Alright, so attraction is basically about the ultra short term. Now, you might have thought, judging by what I've just told you in the last 20 minutes, that I'm totally opposed to any sort of sales psychology. And I am against sales psychology being used in a dishonest way to persuade people. Typically it's either unethical or you're just making up for lack of understanding what your ideal prospects really need. And when you don't know what they need and they're not quite sure if they're in the right place, well, then, hardcore sales psychology does work. There's no doubt about it. Scarcity is hardwired into our brains. Bonuses, that's hardwired into our brains. We like free stuff. That's why people respond. But it's disrespectful of where they're at because quite often they can't use your information or your product or your service. And it really shows some level of disrespect because you're not making the effort to really understand where they're at. So, having said that, sales psychology does work, and there is one place where you pretty much must use it, and that is right in the attraction stage. Right at the very, very beginning when you went to get people's attention. And the term we've come up with is that you politely and respectfully interrupt people. You interrupt them, but it has to be kind of a firm interruption. There is no other way of standing out in the marketplace. I could go on, show you plenty of examples from practice where people underplay their hand and go, well, I don't want to be too loud and too shouty, etc. Fact is, in order to get people's attention at the beginning, you have to. Now, you don't have to, and I don't think you should, use hype. Don't go overboard because in many places it's totally oversaturated. Again, I've got tons of... I give you one example, I'll just tell you about it, right? On YouTube, there are a bunch of videos, and there is a whole group of videos in the learn guitar world. And one of the videos, or what has happened over time is that there's so many videos that people don't know what to click on. So the headlines are now clickbait. This is the best solo ever. This is the fastest solo ever. Must watch, all in all caps, etc., etc. So they've completely gone over the top. And that is something you want to avoid. Instead, what you do is you attract people's attention by focusing very specifically on their needs. And everything I've shown you before, the 4-quadrant model, the 4 different quadrants have very different needs. So that's why you start looking at those. The 5 energy types of the 5E model, again, have very different needs. And that's why you take that information and you put it into the attraction phase to attract people very specifically where they're at, being respectful of what they need, and then give it to them. The next phase then is the conversation, and this is where you keep the interest. And it's basically, in the attraction phase, your prospects are in charge. They are deciding if they want to talk to you or not. In the conversation phase, you now need to very quickly establish, or they need to be able to establish for themselves whether it's worth continuing the conversation. And this is where you keep their interest. Now, the beauty is, these phases are once again built on or based on science. It's how the short-term, medium-term, and long-term memory works, and also the attention part of the brain. Again, there are beautiful connections between attention and focus and interest in things. And the final one then is the transformation part. And that is basically the underlying reason why we're doing stuff, because we want to have something of transformational value. We want to help people transform their lives, or we want to transform people's lives for them. And what is happening there in terms of interest, in terms of paying attention to you, is that you're building the know, like, and trust factor. Again, I can't go into massive detail of how this works, but that's basically our work. Right? We start with the attraction phase. We show you how to use all the things we've used before, the different informational needs, the different fundamental questions people ask themselves, the 4 quadrants, all this kind of thing, how to use those to attract someone's attention in the first place, then how to start a conversation to basically invite people in. The conversation part is aligned in many ways to permission-based marketing. So you get people's permission to continue the conversation. But the beauty is by doing this rejection type thing I've talked about earlier, you reject as many unqualified people as possible, as early as possible. So you're being respectful of what their needs are, and you're not suddenly surprising them, oh, by the way, what I've got here is not good for you, because when you've got that, you've got some negative feedback. At the end, there's transformation. Now, this whole thing is kind of a circular thing, because you only want to attract people where you can truly be at your very best, deliver your best work, the transformation you want to deliver. And again, a lot of our clients, when they start out, they kind of put on a dog and pony show because they've been taught all this direct response nonsense. Then they feel they need to bend over backwards, try to please everyone and appeal to everyone, and as a result, quite often their message is diluted and they cannot or can no longer deliver their very best work. They're no longer in flow, and as a result, transformation suffers. So anyway, that is the high level model. That's basically our assumption. That's how we work. And if you are interested, do reach out to us. There's plenty of information on the site. And of course, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, just leave a comment here, or reach out through the support desk. Alrighty, cheers, bye.